The silent house. The cold night air clung to my skin as I trudged down the narrow street. It was past midnight, and the echoes of the game still buzzed in my head. Cheers, the roar of the crowd, the blaring stadium lights. My team had won, and I should have been riding high on adrenaline, but the excitement had faded into a strange unease the further I got from the stadium. It was my birthday yesterday, 20 years old. 20. The age where everything was supposed to feel different, like some magic switch had flipped. But the day had come and gone with no big celebrations, just a beer with a few friends at halftime. I guess I expected more. I hadn't realized I'd wandered this far from the main road. The street was unusually quiet, darker than it should have been. Streetlights flickered overhead, their orange glow casting long, twisted shadows across the cracked pavement. My feet shuffled, and I stuffed my hands deeper into my jacket pockets, my breath puffing out in small clouds. That's when I heard it. A sound so faint at first I almost missed it, a low, distant hum like static on an old radio. I slowed my pace, glancing around. The houses on this block looked neglected, windows blacked out, yards overgrown. But one house stood out. It was smaller than the rest, wedged between two larger, derelict homes. Its roof sagged, shingles peeling, and the front door was slightly ajar, creaking ever so slightly as if moved by a breath of wind that didn't exist. There was no light coming from inside, just darkness, thick and impenetrable. That sound, though, it was coming from inside the house. The hum grew louder, becoming a high-pitched whine, like feedback from an old speaker. But there was something else beneath it, a scraping noise, faint but unmistakable. It sounded like metal dragging across wood. I hesitated at the foot of the narrow driveway. I should have kept walking. I knew that. But something tugged at me, a morbid curiosity, the kind you get when you pass a car crash and can't help but look. I told myself it was just some broken appliance, maybe a busted TV someone left running. But deep down I knew better. The house looked forgotten, almost like it didn't belong here, like it had been plucked from some other place, some other time, and dropped into this street. Its windows were thick with grime, the lawn overgrown with weeds that swayed in the breeze. The mailbox, long and used, sagged on its post, the number 47 barely visible beneath layers of peeling paint. As I approached the front steps, the sound changed again. Now it was a low rumble, like something heavy was being dragged across the floor inside. My skin prickled. I swallowed hard, my heart thumping in my chest. I wasn't sure why I did it, but I stepped closer, drawn by that sound, that unnatural hum. Something about it seemed familiar, almost like a tune I'd forgotten, a distant memory hovering just out of reach. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be watching me, but the street was empty, the world outside silent. I stood at the edge of the open doorway, staring into the inky blackness beyond. My breath caught in my throat. The air smelled stale, like mold and old wood. And there, in the silence, I heard something else. Whispers. They were faint, almost inaudible, but they were there, buried beneath the hum. Words I couldn't quite make out. The longer I listened, the more they seemed to tug at my mind, filling it with a cold, creeping dread. I could still turn back. I could still walk away and forget this place ever existed. But I didn't. I stepped through the door. And the darkness swallowed me whole. The old wooden door creaked as I pushed it open fully, the hinges letting out a high-pitched wail like a cry of protest. I hesitated for a second, glancing back at the darkened street behind me. The stadium lights were long gone, swallowed by the trees and distance. No one knew I was here. No one would see me disappear into this forgotten place. My throat tightened, but I pressed forward, stepping into the musty air that clung to the house like an old moth-eaten blanket. The floor beneath my feet groaned as I shifted my weight, thick layers of dust kicking up with each step. It was like walking through a memory that had long since been abandoned. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the dimness, and I could barely make out the interior. The windows were covered in grime so thick that not even the weak moonlight outside could pierce through. Shadows filled every corner, stretching across the walls, the ceiling, the old furniture left behind like skeletons of a life long gone. I didn't know what compelled me to keep moving. There was nothing welcoming about this place, nothing inviting. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of rot and mold, mixed with something else, something metallic like rusted iron. Still, I found myself drifting deeper into the house, each footstep sending small clouds of dust swirling up from the floor. My fingers brushed against the rough, peeling wallpaper as I walked. It was floral, once bright and colorful, now faded and curling at the edges, as though time itself had tried to erase it. Pictures hung crooked on the walls, black and white photos, their subjects obscured by smudges and grime. I stopped in front of one, squinting to make out the figures. It looked like a family, 2 parents, a child between them, all of them staring straight ahead, unsmiling. Their eyes seemed to follow me as I moved, though I told myself it was just a trick of the light. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter around myself as I wandered into what must have once been a living room. A moth-eaten armchair sagged in the corner, facing an old TV set that looked like it hadn't worked in decades. The kind with rabbit ear antennas and knobs you had to turn to switch channels. The static hum I'd heard outside seemed louder in here, vibrating in the walls, though the TV was completely dead. Something about this place felt wrong, like it hadn't just been abandoned but forgotten, erased. The remnants of lives once lived here were scattered everywhere. An overturned tea kettle on the floor, a single child's shoe peeking out from under a dusty side table, an old doll missing one of its glassy eyes, staring up from beneath a pile of yellowed newspapers. All of it left to rot, as though the people who lived here had vanished in the middle of their day, leaving everything behind. I moved through the room slowly, careful not to touch anything more than I had to. The static hum continued, a strange undercurrent to the thick silence. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. There didn't seem to be any electronics still functioning in the house. But it felt like it was following me, threading through the air, tugging me deeper into the house. My foot struck something hard, sending it clattering across the wooden floor. I crouched down, my fingers brushing against the cool metal of an old wind-up toy. It was shaped like a soldier, his paint chipped and his limbs stiff. As I picked it up, I realized something. The toy had been wound but never let go. It had been left in place as though someone had planned to watch it move but had abandoned it in a hurry. I set it down carefully, wiping my hands on my jeans as I continued deeper into the house. The layout was strange, narrow halls that twisted and turned in ways that didn't make sense, leading into rooms that felt too small or too large. I came to a staircase, the old wood banister covered in cobwebs, the steps sagging like they couldn't hold much weight anymore. My eyes traced the curve of the stairs up into the darkness above. I didn't want to go up there. Every instinct screamed for me to turn around, to leave. But something drew my attention, a low, almost imperceptible noise. Not the static hum this time, but a faint, rhythmic thumping like something was moving upstairs. I stepped onto the first stair cautiously, testing the weight. It creaked but held. As I ascended, the sound grew louder, the air around me growing colder. Each step groaned under my feet as if the house itself was warning me not to go any further. I reached the top of the stairs, the landing opening up into a long, narrow hallway. Faint moonlight leaked through the cracks in the roof, casting the floor in pale, broken beams. The hum seemed to retreat as I moved forward, the thumping growing louder instead. I squinted, trying to see the end of the hallway, but something about it seemed to stretch on forever, the shadows distorting the space. The floor beneath me shuddered, then cracked. I froze. For a split second, everything was still, the air hanging heavy and thick, before the boards beneath my feet gave way with a deafening crash. I fell, my arms flailing as the wood splintered beneath me. For a moment, I was suspended in midair, a brief, terrifying second before I slammed into the floor below. Pain shot through my body, my breath knocked out of my lungs. I lay there for a moment, dazed, my limbs aching from the impact. Dust rained down from the gaping hole above me, the broken remnants of the floorboards hanging like jagged teeth from the ceiling. I groaned, rolling onto my side, wincing as I tried to stand. My ankle throbbed, but it didn't seem broken. As I steadied myself, something caught my ear again, the hum. Only now it wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from below. I turned, my eyes finding the door at the far end of the room. It was barely visible, hidden in the shadows, but I knew what it was, a basement door. The air around it seemed colder, thicker, like it was leaking out from whatever was behind that door. The hum was louder now, accompanied by a faint scratching sound like nails on wood. Something was moving down there. I should have left. I should have run. But that pull, stronger now, drew me toward the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I limped across the room, each step heavy, each breath labored. The door seemed to grow larger the closer I got, its surface warped with age, the wood dark and damp. I reached for the doorknob, hesitating for just a moment. The hum was almost deafening now, vibrating through my bones, making my teeth ache. My hand trembled as I wrapped my fingers around the cold brass knob, feeling the weight of it in my palm. And then I turned it. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing a staircase descending into the pitch-black abyss below. The air that seeped out from the basement was frigid, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something foul like decay. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down into the darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hum had stopped. All that remained was the sound of my breathing, the soft shuffle of my feet as I took the first step into the unknown below. The stairs groaned under my weight as I descended into the basement. Each step felt like walking deeper into the mouth of something ancient and waiting, the air colder with every breath. My heart pounded in my ears, but my legs moved on their own, as if the pull of this place was stronger than my fear. The darkness below seemed impenetrable, swallowing the weak light that trickled down from above. As I reached the bottom step, the cold, damp stone floor sent a chill through my shoes, and the scent of wet earth mixed with something sharp and metallic. My phone's flashlight flickered to life, casting a shaky beam across the basement. The walls were rough stone, wet with condensation, and old wooden beams crisscrossed the ceiling above, sagging under the weight of the house. The first thing I noticed was the jewelry. There were dozens of pieces scattered across the floor, glinting weakly in the faint light. At first glance, it looked like the room was full of treasure, the kind you'd see in some old pirate's chest in the movies. But as I got closer, the illusion shattered. The jewelry was broken. Necklaces with missing chains, rings twisted beyond recognition, watches smashed as if someone had stomped on them. They were scattered across the stone floor, their fragments strewn haphazardly, as though dropped in a hurry or thrown in frustration. Some pieces looked older than others, rusted and tarnished, while a few still held the faint sheen of once being valuable. I crouched down, picking up a bracelet. The silver links were cold and heavy in my hand, but the clasp had been snapped, the design warped. It felt odd in my fingers, almost personal, as though it had once belonged to someone who had been here long before me. I dropped it back onto the pile and kept moving. The basement stretched further than I had expected. The narrow beam of my light barely reached the edges of the room, casting strange shadows that danced across the walls. Old furniture, covered in white sheets, stood like forgotten ghosts in the corners, chairs with their legs broken off, an old grandfather clock without its pendulum, and stacks of old newspapers yellowed with age. Everything down here felt off, as if it had been left behind in a rush. As I moved deeper, I stumbled upon a long, low table tucked against one of the stone walls. It was covered with more broken items. Rusted tools, cracked porcelain figurines, even what looked like a shattered picture frame. But amidst the chaos was something stranger still, an old, broken pocket watch. Its face was cracked, but when I held it up to my ear, I could hear a faint ticking, as if time was still trying to push forward, even in this forgotten place. The air was different down here, thick and heavy with something I couldn't quite place. It felt like the basement was alive, as if the walls were closing in, shifting ever so slightly when I wasn't looking. My footsteps echoed, and I could feel the weight of the house above pressing down. Every corner seemed to hold something new, something strange. That's when I heard it, the sound. It came from further ahead, past the stacks of broken furniture and debris, a faint metallic buzzing, almost like a low hum. It vibrated through the floor beneath me, faint but unmistakable. My pulse quickened. It wasn't the same hum from upstairs. This was something else, something alive, and it was coming from the farthest corner of the basement. I stepped carefully, weaving through the forgotten remnants of the house. As I moved closer to the sound, I noticed something else: chains. They hung from the ceiling in rusted loops, some reaching the floor, others swaying slightly in the draft. They clinked softly together, the metal grinding against itself, though I didn't feel any wind down here. My flashlight flickered over them, casting long shadows that writhed like snakes on the walls. As I approached the back of the basement, the buzzing grew louder. The walls seemed to close in, narrowing until I found myself standing before a door, a heavy wooden door, splintered with age. The sound was coming from behind it. My heart raced, my mouth dry. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but something stronger, some primal curiosity, pulled me forward. I reached for the doorknob, fingers trembling, and twisted it slowly. It opened with a low groan, the air behind it rushing out to meet me, colder and sharper than before. My flashlight revealed a small room beyond, cluttered with more junk, piles of rotting wood, old metal pipes, and something large in the far corner, obscured by shadow. The buzzing was louder now, filling the space, vibrating through the stone floor. I stepped forward. Then it happened. A sharp snap, followed by a searing pressure around my leg. I looked down and my blood turned to ice. A massive metal trap had snapped shut around my ankle, its jagged teeth digging into my flesh. It was old, rusted, but strong. Panic surged through me. I tried to pull away, but the trap held me fast, the chain attached to it rattling as I moved. I gasped, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I should have felt pain, unimaginable pain, but all I felt was fear. Cold, paralyzing fear. My mind raced, my heartbeat thudding in my ears as I stared at the jagged metal teeth that held me captive. I pulled harder, but the chain only rattled, anchored to something deep in the stone floor. I stumbled forward, my body moving on instinct, dragging the heavy chain behind me. My ankle throbbed, but it wasn't the pain that drove me, it was the sound. The buzzing. I needed to see it. I needed to know what was making that horrible noise. As I limped further into the room, the source of the sound became clear. A large pipe jutted out from the wall, thick and corroded with age. It snaked upward through the ceiling, its surface vibrating slightly as the buzzing noise pulsed through it. The pipe was connected to something that stretched up through the house and out into the yard beyond. I stared at it, my mind racing to piece together what this could mean. The pipe groaned, a low, metallic moan, and the buzzing intensified. It wasn't just noise, it was energy, something alive. I could feel it in the air, in the floor beneath me. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just old plumbing. It felt like the house itself was breathing through it. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had to get out of here. But when I turned to leave, the chain yanked me back. My leg was still caught in the trap, the thick iron chain securing me to the floor. I pulled with all my strength, my hands shaking as they wrapped around the cold metal, but it wouldn't budge. The chain was anchored deep in the stone, rusted but immovable. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, swallowed by the basement's thick, oppressive air. My breaths came out in short gasps, and the buzzing grew louder, filling my head, my bones, my soul. The pipe groaned again, and I could hear something moving within it, something scraping along the inside like claws on metal. Panic surged through me as I realized the truth. I wasn't going to make it out. I yanked on the chain again, harder this time, but it only dug the trap deeper into my flesh. My vision blurred, and the world around me seemed to tilt. The house had me now. The chain rattled once more as I slumped to the floor, my hands still gripping it uselessly, my heart pounding in my ears. The last thing I saw, as my vision darkened and the buzzing overtook me, was the faint outline of a figure standing in the corner, watching. Waiting. No one ever saw me again.